Warm welcome viewers, you're watching 7 at 7. I'm Preeti Chaudhary. Our top focus, Liz Truss steps down as UK Prime Minister. Who's next? We're going to get you all the answers to the many questions that are arising. I'm Preeti Chaudhary and these are the headlines. Liz Truss steps down as UK Prime Minister after 45 days in office, becomes the shortest serving PM. Economic crisis forces exit. Delhi air quality worsens as stubble burning begins around NCR. Supreme Court refuses to hear plea demanding a lift on the cracker ban. Outrage across Hyderabad over 4-year-old's rape. School principal arrested, but anger grows across the city. Parents stage protest. Jayalalitha death mystery deepens. Purported clip of the former TNCM goes viral. Coughing and visibly irritated Jaya on video as doctors perform tests on her. After Bhagwat, Hosable reignites population debate. RSS leader blames Bangladesh immigrants, calls for anti-conversion law. All right, viewers, as expected, Liz Truss has resigned from the UK Prime Minister's post 45 days after she won the race for the top post, beating Indian origin MP Rishi Sunak. What's really happened, viewers, is that Liz Truss has stepped down, making her the shortest serving Prime Minister in the history of the world. The UK Prime Minister Liz Truss resigned, beginning an end to a very controversial and a very, very short reign in midst of fallout over her ambitious tax cut policy. In a bid to survive the political crisis, Truss had ripped up the mini budget that caused turmoil in financial markets and replaced Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor with Conservative leader Jeremy Hunt. The cost of government borrowing rose and the pound fell further following her press conference announcing the change. Her resignation comes now a day after Truss announced a parliament that she is a fighter and not a quitter, and in midst of boos from the opposition MP, she stepped down today. All eyes right now on the likes of Rishi Sunak. Will he succeed Liz Truss?
I came into office at a time of great economic and international instability. Families and businesses were worried about how to pay their bills. Putin's illegal war in Ukraine threatens the security of our whole continent, and our country has been held back for too long by low economic growth. I was elected by the Conservative Party with a mandate to change this. We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
All right, viewers, Liz Truss making her speech right outside the iconic door of 10 Downing Street. She stepped down, saying categorically that she could not live up to the promises that she had made. 45 days in power, making her the shortest-serving Prime Minister ever. I want to quickly introduce my colleague Lavina, who's tracking developments very closely in London, because who next is a question that is immediately being asked. Also, tracking the developments back home is my colleague Geeta Mohan, our Foreign Affairs editor. Lavina, let me ask you a question that you must have already heard quite a few times by now. Who next?
That's the question that the corridors of Westminster want to know as well. It is going to be back to whether it's going to be the rule book needs to be seen at now. The 1922 committee will decide who next, and will it be just an MP vote, which it looks like, or will it be a runner-up? Clear, because we had a runner-up with the MP vote last time. It was Rishi Sunak. Do they want to do the whole process again of choosing the next leader? Or they're definitely not, it seems, not going to the public at large, because this is a unique position that has presented itself. The rule book needs to be consulted. It needs to be seen who all are again putting their hat in the ring. Well, there will be a ring or not. That also has not yet been quite clear at this point in time. Everybody is still contemplating as to what the process of this election is going to be, because it is the Tory party which is in power, which needs to choose its leader, who will be the Prime Minister. That was the case last time as well, when Boris Johnson had to resign and Liz Truss came. But last time, Rishi Sunak was did top the list as far as the MP election goes. So once the list comes down, to rewind, I'll do a quick rewind of the process. The last time we had 7 people throwing their hats in the ring, and they were brought down to 2 people by the vote of Tory party member of parliament. And then these 2 people went across to the country, to the Tory party members, not the entire country, please, just the members of the governing party, which is the Tory or the Conservative Party as it's known. Now, this time round, we don't have that kind of time. We have general elections in May already, the scheduled election. There is 2 ways. Now, either the Tory party anyways has to choose their leader, who should be a person who can lead them in the next general election. This is prime objective in their mind. Now, for their leader of the party will be the leader of the country as well. Is it going to go to the general election or not? I don't know. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible, looking at the turmoil that it has been. But as of now, whether it's going to be an election just for the MPs, or will it be a runner-up kind of situation where Rishi Sunak automatically becomes, we don't know yet, as that needs to be decided, and that's what is the discussion that is happening
Lavina,
right now.
How much is it, just talk? Because there's a fair amount of chatter over possibly Mr. Boris Johnson being, coming in again.
There is a lot of chatter here that Rishi Sunak should be brought in, because he was anyways the choice of the member of parliament. All the MPs chose him, and it is, and it looks like we don't even have the time to go to the members of Tory party members. Will Boris Johnson come back in hindsight? Now, that is quite unlikely in terms of rules. Now, Britain is a place where rules are followed. This is where we stand now. The rules need to be seen. 1922 committee that leads these kinds of things, administrative part of a party, they need to look into the rule book and tell us what is happening. At this point in time, they are also
What are the chances of Jeremy Hunt, because he seems to have climbed up the list of favourites in less than a week's time?
He already said no. He has said no. He has, as far as it, if my information is right at this point, because it's all fast changing, people are making up their mind and changing their mind. The last I know, Jeremy Hunt had already put his name out of the list. Remember, he was one of the people who could not garner enough support from the last time when MP votes were carried out. So in the MP vote, the person three people who stood at the top position, first was Rishi Sunak, then it was Liz Truss, and then it was Penny Mordaunt. Will they go back to the same situation and say, let's save time and let's choose the person who was anyway chosen by the member of parliament? Or they don't want to do that because he was rejected by the Tory party leadership. Let's go through another round of election within the parliament, or let's within the circuit. 1920 in consultation, that is the backbenchers. 1922 is the committee of member of parliaments of the backbenchers who are not in the cabinet. So should we all decide amongst the party to choose our leader? Because it's really the Tory party leader that they have to choose, who is governing and who automatically becomes the Prime Minister. So there are a lot of administrative rule-bound questions, and speculations are many. There was a group that really denied Boris Johnson. Yet there was another larger group within the circuit. The Tory party members, a certain group, has always liked Boris Johnson. He also had some support within the member of parliaments as well. Now, where he felt quite hurt and betrayed was when Rishi Sunak pulled his support, and that led to many junior ministers pulling out their support, and Sajid Javid did it. So that's what brought Boris Johnson government down, and that was not taken kindly by many members who were quite close or really wanted Boris Johnson. So there are all sorts of noises and voices. What needs to be understood very quickly is that it is a very disunited party at this, as it stands. Just when the country needs stability because of the war, because of cost of living, as we know, the party that is leading the country is very disunited. In order for country to survive, I think it is going to be a push towards general election is what my instinct tells me.
You know, Lavina, do stay on with me. You know, what's really interesting in all of this, viewers, is whenever you see instability, political instability in a country, what you see is the markets crash. It's the other way around what's happened here. UK pound has gained as Liz Truss steps down. Understandably so, because her entire economic policy backfired. We're going to get in a word from Lavina, but do stay with us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly cut across to the brief interaction my colleague Akshita had with UK parliamentarian Lord Meghnad Desai. Listen in, and we're back with Lavina on the other side.
We're getting you all the latest updates coming in from the United Kingdom, where moments ago Liz Truss officially stepped down as the UK Prime Minister. And joining us on this broadcast is Lord Meghnad Desai, UK politician. Lord Desai, thank you, sir, for joining us here on India Today. Liz Truss has resigned in a matter of 45 days. It's led to a lot of questions of what happens next to the United Kingdom, Lord Desai, already dealing with, in fact, this economic mess, economic instability, now coupled with political instability, sir.
Well, basically, yes, the country is in a mess. There's no doubt about that. And the Conservative Party has lost a lot of reputation because of the mess they got themselves into. But we have a law here. It's called Fixed Term Parliament Act, which says that parliamentary elections would be called every 5 years. And now the last election was 2019, so next election has to be in 2024. Now, in the old days, the Prime Minister could call an election anytime he or she wanted. Now that is not allowed unless the opposition agrees to an election and all that. Now the Conservative Party is not going to call an election. They will try and get somebody very quickly. They've said 1 week, but they'll probably do it before that. My hunch is that it will be Jeremy Hunt who will be chosen to be Prime Minister very quickly. And he will take over because he has reassured the markets. And I think the economy is basically all right. But these sorts of policy announcements by Liz Truss has upset everybody. And I think we'll have to forget all that and get back to normal as soon as possible and then carry on. But it has been very damaging to the reputation of UK.
All right, viewers, I want to immediately cut across to my colleague Jonathan Gilbert, who's getting us the latest updates from London. Jonathan, you know, the fact is what we were talking about earlier, usually when you see instability, political instability at that in any country, you see the markets crash. It's the other way around. I see the pound gaining right now, where UK is concerned.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it couldn't crash any further, could it? I mean, the pound has reached unprecedented levels against both the dollar and the euro over the last disastrous month and a half. So yes, that is. I mean, look, let's look back and look forward. It was a catastrophic error of judgment on the part of Liz Truss and her then Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng to put forward this ludicrous tax-cutting budget, which absolutely spooked the markets and essentially tanked the UK economy overnight. But looking forward now, what they're looking at is some sort of stability candidate. Now, I heard your colleague there talking about Jeremy Hunt. That's a little bit of an outlier, I would suggest, considering that he's lost very convincingly, lost 2 election challenges now. I'm very, very intrigued indeed at the concept of Boris Johnson's return. I think we need to watch that very carefully over the next 24 or 48 hours. But I think what you've really got to understand, what helps distill this, is to try and imagine there are essentially 2 separate electorates here. There is the minority electorate of Conservative Party members. These are largely elderly, male, southern individuals, and under current Conservative Party rules, they have the final say as to who gets to be Tory leader. So it consistently skews right, and it consistently skews elderly, and it consistently skews white, unfortunate to say. So whether they are capable of electing a Tory leader who is the best for the country and the most stable for the country and the country's economy really remains to be seen. I think that's the big question here. Now, Boris Johnson, for instance, to take an example, polls very highly amongst Conservative members, but he currently polls very low amongst the electorate. So were he elected to Prime Minister status, he would, under current polling conditions, lose the next election by a landslide. Will that sway the opinion of the selectorate of the Conservative Party members? That's why, essentially, this is such a mess. And I don't think there's very little prospect, indeed, of what they're starting to call a coronation over the next week or so, where the Tory party unites around one single unity candidate, because there's such schism and such fraction that still exists within the Tory party. So for those of us who don't have skin in this game, it's going to be very, very entertaining indeed over the next week or so to see how this situation resolves itself.
You know, Jonathan, I'm going to touch upon two issues that you spoke about. Number one, when we talk about Boris Johnson, you say you need to watch it carefully. Unpopularity with the electorate, would you reckon? The unpopularity of Ms. Truss would possibly soften that for Mr. Boris Johnson?
Yeah, it's quite possible. I don't know. I'm sure there's an Aesop's fable about this. You know, better the devil you know. We thought Boris was the worst prime minister in living memory, and then along comes Liz Truss. I think Boris is remembered very fondly, as I say, by members of the Conservative Party itself, but increasingly one wonders if perhaps the general electorate might also be suffering slightly from buyer's remorse. I mean, one recalls that essentially the reason he was forced out of office was not through economic mismanagement, it was just through moral failings. Now, Britain has changed a great deal in the last 50 years or so. You know, there was a day where you couldn't be a prime minister if, for instance, you were of an ethnic minority or you happened to be homosexual. These considerations have completely changed, and I do wonder now if, with the benefit of a few months of hindsight, people might look back at Boris's little peccadillos, throwing a party during lockdown or whatever, and perhaps be a little bit more forgiving. So there are 2 years at least until the next mandatory general election, assuming there isn't some sort of catastrophic, French Revolution-style event. So if Boris were returned to the prime ministership, could he spend those 2 years shoring up his reputation with the British people? It's not impossible, and that may be one of the considerations going through Conservative MPs and Conservative Party members' minds as we speak.
Right. Well, what are a few scandals when you look at somebody who's trashed the economy when it comes down to that? But Jonathan, stay with me. I want to quickly bring in my colleague Geeta Mohan as well into this conversation. Geeta, Jonathan touched upon the fact of being consistently skewed white. How does that fare where Rishi Sunak is concerned as a contender?
Again, this was not a question even for Rishi Sunak when a lot of them asked whether if it has to do with him not being white. And he said it has nothing to do with race, it has to do with performance. Do not know whether if Rishi Sunak would agree with Jonathan over here on that front. But Jonathan had made a very important point, Preeti. I do not know whether if I've come in a little late in this, into this conversation, but he made a very important point. The distinction between the fact that in the elections in the Conservative Party, there are two phases. One is when the MPs elect, and the second is when the members of the Conservative Party elect. And if, I'd like to know from Jonathan, if the same process continues, there is going to be no clear-cut winner, because the members of the party do not really run the government. And if the person who's elected does not enjoy the confidence of the members of Parliament, then certainly there is going to be a repeat, so to say, of what happened with Liz Truss.
All right, okay. Geeta, I'm running out of time, but I'm going to get that question answered from Jonathan. Jonathan, would you like to take it?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, look, as you say, the Conservative Party, they like rule. Conservatives. That's why they're Conservative. And the current Conservative rules are that if there is more than one candidate, then they must observe the same process as they did last time round. MPs will whittle the candidates down to 2, and then it goes to the Tory party membership with all the factionalism and all the bloodletting and all the backbiting that involves. Now, the only way out of this mess is if the Tory party unites around one single candidate. If they say, look, for the sheer parliamentary and electoral survivability of our party, we need to decide within ourselves, without putting it to this hyper-conservative Conservative Party electorate, who will be the candidate. And if they settle upon one candidate, then that candidate is essentially anointed, is crowned as Tory leader, and then they can push on without all the mess and all the backbiting and all the factionalism of yet another leadership contest, which will frankly trash the Tory party even more than it has been already.
All right. Jonathan, we're going to thank you there. Thank you. We're going to come right back. Geeta, appreciate you joining us as well. But, I want to leave our viewers with this. There's something that we didn't quite inherit as India from the British, and that was the fabulous sense of humor, even during the, times like this, trying political times. The British Humour Intact, an English publication, the Daily Star, had started a live stream a week ago where it placed a lettuce next to a picture of Liz Truss. You see that right there? Well, with the caption, "Can Liz Truss outlast this lettuce?" Finally, on day 7, Lizzie the lettuce has outlasted the UK Prime Minister. Well, there you have it. And that lettuce that you see right there has outlasted the British Prime Minister. Very, very interesting. At the last time my colleague was looking at it, it had over 20,000 viewers tuned in as Liz Truss stepped down. With that, I'm going to go into a quick break. You do stay with me. On the other side is To The Point.